All right, it's Friday. So I'm trying the light from behind again, but this time I have a reflector, so maybe it'll be less sort of glowy around here because that looked really terrible and like made it like muddy at the edge. Ugh. I'm also shooting in Cinelec D. I don't keep this camera in movie mode because when you're in movie mode, they don't let you do auto ISO, which is kind of annoying. But I'm in movie mode today, and I'm trying Cinelec D because I'm trying Cinelec D because I do like Cinelec D the most, even though it requires a little bit of tweaking in post for color. But so I'm trying to decide whether it's worth using Cinelec D and not being able to use auto ISO versus using a profile that's a photography profile and then having access to auto ISO. I still think I like auto ISO better. I can't tell if it's glowy or not. Anyway, so that's my camera tweak. Did I write this week? Yeah, I was sort of chomping at the bit, and I also started my writer's room this week. We're writing a show. We're like conceiving and writing a whole show. So we did that. I guess that counts as writing. I also sort of like went through all of my pitches to see if there was anything good, and there was a lot of stuff that I can't use right now because I'm sort of pitching myself as a comedy writer, and these were all like hard sci-fi ideas. But so I did some of that, and I did some free writing. So I've done a decent amount of writing. I should have done more, but I did some writing this week. Did I read anything? No. I have a novel of somebody I know who I think this Monday I'm gonna just sit down and read the whole thing. Yeah. What did I watch? Well, I've been still powering through The Crown. I'm almost done with season 1. It's good. So, I watched Upgrade because I saw a review, because it didn't look very interesting to me. But then I saw a review and they're like, yeah, no, it's actually really good sci-fi. And I was like, I'm desperate for sci-fi. So I watched it, and it was pretty little aggressive on their point of view about things. And I think the things movies do the least well is sort of point of view and pushing an agenda, and this one definitely had an agenda. Having said that, though, it was a pretty satisfying story. So go see Upgrade. Watched Hereditary last night. I don't usually go to the Thursday night opening screening, but I did last night, and Hereditary is sort of a ghost movie, I guess. Supernatural movies don't scare me. Alien movies do, but supernatural movies just nah. But this one, that was the most scared in a non-alien movie I've ever been. And it scared me so much so that it brought me back to the movie that I think is the scariest movie of all time, which is called Dark Skies, which is an alien abduction story from about 5 years ago. So I was so afraid in watching Hereditary that I like flashed back to my experience of watching Dark Skies, that is how scary that was. So Hereditary is real scary. When you actually look back on it and follow the plot, you realize it's about as well put together plot-wise as a superhero movie, but it is, in the moment, legitimately scary. The sound design was great. The visuals were great. The entire thing took place at night, which makes things kind of scary. So I honestly think that was like well done, because it was real scary. I also have been watching a lot of YouTube this week. I've been watching a lot of short documentaries. I used to watch, years ago when cable was still a thing, all the modern Marvel stuff, even though it's a really dated format, but they do like modern Marvels, battleships, modern Marvels, dams. So I watched on YouTube the Modern Marvels Jet Engines documentary, which I really enjoyed. And then I've also started watching, so the Vlog Brothers are everything YouTube. They have a vlog that they share. They do Discovery News, I think, or science show. I forget what it's called, but they do a bunch of stuff. And one of the things they did several years ago was called Crash Course, and I watched a few of those, but they're like 15-minute episodes about an idea. So I've been I think I've watched like 30 crash courses, a bunch of crash course history, like the Mongols and the Middle Ages, and I watched a bunch of crash course science and a bunch of, I think they have crash course psych too, because I think that's what got me into it. So I've been watching a lot of really short form documentaries about one idea, and very satisfying. And for whatever reason, that 15-minute number just really works for me, because wherever I'm driving to between stops takes about 15 minutes, so I can watch a whole of one. Yeah, it's pretty good. So yeah, and also John and Hank Green are just so charismatic and charming. It's moving right along. A writing tip: don't overthink it when you're writing. If you know, it's hard to get going writing, because I would argue writer's block, in quotes, is just mostly just overthinking it or fear, and you just got to go through it and just write. You can always rewrite, but the whole thing is, the more you overthink it, and if that means don't write, then write. If that means you put a bunch of nuance in it, you're probably gonna have to take all that nuance out, because there's such a huge disconnect between your thoughts and your working brain, and then your ability to translate that into language. There's just so many steps that can get muddled up, and the more you complicate it, the more you overthink it, the less of a chance the original idea is going to make it all the way into the language. So yeah, that's why in my opinion, it's why complicated stuff you have to build from the outside in. Like a heist movie, you have to start from the end and work backwards, because it's too many spinning plates that you have to keep spinning, but also you're up against sort of a weird medium that is language. It's not just you shaping ideas, but you have to shape ideas and then filter them through language, which makes things messy, real messy. So don't overthink it. So whatever that means to you, don't overthink it. If that means writing, then don't overthink it. If that means unnecessary complications, don't overthink it. If that means you think it's excellent, but you really want to tweak it one more time, but everybody's already telling you it's excellent, don't overthink it. Yeah. So, box office. I got 4 out of 5. Last week I said Solo, Deadpool, Adrift, Avengers, and Action Point, and sure enough, it was all of that, except for instead of Action Point, it was Book Club. So Action Point did really bad, actually. Let me look at that, because that was, like, I was unmotivated to see it, as I probably mentioned, but yeah, Action Point made $2.4 million in their opening weekend, and probably won't make their money back at a $19 million budget. So it opened 9th, which is crazy. I mean, it's not crazy, but it's like, apparently my rush to judgment on Action Point was society's rush to judgment on Action Point on some level. So that's too bad, because I like Knoxville, and I like that he's trying new stuff, but this didn't look like it was going to be any good, and the audience has spoken. This week, I think it's really easy. Ocean's 8 is opening this weekend, so Ocean's 8 number 1, Han Solo number 2, Hereditary, which I saw and is real scary, is number 3, and horror movies tend to do really, really, really good at the box office, especially in the context of their price. That's its own rant. Adrift number 4 and Avengers number 5. I'd be very surprised if anything is different. It'll really just be between whether Hereditary gets such an audience this weekend that it will beat Solo, but I would be very surprised. So, and the last thing, 10 minutes, wow, I'm just stumbling through this and it's going faster than a lot of them. My recommend this week is GoldenEye 007. So, there's no debate. The best James Bond 007 movies are the Daniel Craig ones because of the writing, because of the planning. It helps that Daniel Craig is a shit-hot actor and just has the chops, but GoldenEye is not, or 007 is really not about the acting so much as about the chase and the thriller and the action set pieces and all of that. And the new Daniel Craig ones, especially Casino Royale, just do a great job with that. And then all the other, this could be a rant about all 007 movies because they are all over the place, and some of them are so campy they should be cartoons, and some of them are so like bleak and serious that it's like unsettling how disappointing they are and their point of view. And then just out of nowhere, we have the James Bond that I grew up with, which is Pierce Brosnan, which is nobody else's James Bond. I would argue almost everybody's James Bond is Sean Connery. But GoldenEye came out, and admittedly it was really, really long, but it was a good movie. It was like genuinely hit the spots of a movie and like made enough sense while still being completely unbelievable that it was a James Bond movie. It's I wouldn't call it a precursor to the Daniel Craig movies, because the Daniel Craig movies basically started over in all of it, especially the storytelling aspect. But GoldenEye was this just like properly done, kind of campy but still serious enough to make sense spy movie. For me, it helped that out of just happenstance and the video game industry not understanding what the world is, they made a GoldenEye video game that I think is one of the most, if it's not number one, it's one of the most successful video games, probably the most successful first-person shooter of all time. So GoldenEye, if you have 2.5 hours, worst time could be spent. I mean, like the weakest part of that movie is Pierce Brosnan, and he's a decent James Bond in the context of James Bonds. So it isn't. Oh man, I'm slipping into a rant. It's interesting. The big thing now in these big cinematic universes, especially superheroes, they like go out of their way to keep things open-ended and are referential to the Avengers references, Iron Man, that kind of thing. They reference each other, and it's like annoyingly interconnected in the way a marketing department would make it annoyingly interconnected instead of a storytelling department. The James Bonds don't really do that, except for the Daniel Craig ones, which was essentially a plan, but also sort of a result of the era that the Daniel Craig ones came out in, where everybody was doing that, the interconnectedness. James Bond movies, for the most part, are designed to be standalones and designed to be one proper contained story. And there's something really charming to that. It definitely leads to comparisons to itself, and there's a wide swath of the quality of James Bond movies, but I think in the context of a James Bond movie or a 007 movie, the standalone nature sort of the episodic nature of each film is better than one unconnected thing, especially because you have to get a new actor or set of actors for the main roles like every decade. So it's an interesting thing about, and that's partially why the Daniel Craig movies, I mean, they stand, I would say Casino Royale stands alone as far and away the greatest James Bond movie, but the rest of those in that series stand together. But it's really hard to compare them separately in the context of other James Bond movies, because they're more or less considered to be a unit, whereas earlier James Bond movies are one-offs. So it's sort of a counter to the way things are going. You know, would James Bond work as a TV show? Like, I don't know, because there's so much of the hero having to learn something important and change in the James Bond franchise. Maybe not change, because he's always just James Bond, but there's something inherently feature about how James Bond goes about his story. I don't know if you could either stretch it out, and I guess you could stretch a Bond story out into a season, but I don't know if you could squeeze it down into a Bond story being an episode, because just there's a lot of plot there, and you need sort of that immediacy, and you need to be there for all of it in order to really appreciate the story of James Bond struggling and defeating the villain. I don't know. As soon as they make a Die Hard TV show, we'll have our answer. So, because the Ian Fleming's family's never going to let a Bond TV show out of the thing. Anyway, I just doubled the time. All right, bye.